Yellowjackets might be one of the scariest shows out there right now. The horror oscillates between the very real horror of what the characters are really experiencing, being lost out in the wilderness after a traumatic plane crash. But the other kind of horror is a more insidious kind of horror. It's the kind that has you spooked to be outside at night. It's the kind that has you second guessing what's real. If the characters are just insane, or if there's actually something supernatural out there that they brought home with them. And if you're anything like me, you've been asking yourself, what the hell is this thing? You can imagine my surprise when I found it staring back at me from the pages of a history book. The book in question is God, A Human History by Reza Aslan. And I love this book a lot. It ranked very high on my 2025 book ranking. If you want to check that out, link in the description. Now, I'm not necessarily asserting that the deity from this book is definitely the deity from the show, but I think I can make a case that... What can I make a case of? That at least it served as some form of inspiration for the show. And if I'm right, and if Reza Aslan is right, and if the guy who found the drawing of the thing and who drew the drawing of the thing, I'll explain that later. If he's right, I know that's a lot of ifs, but if, then that means that Yellowjackets is a documentary. And that scares the shit out of me. So for context, this is a book that aims to show the evolution of humanity's conception of God throughout the ages. And it does it in such a heartwarming, entertaining way, and I really appreciated that about this book when I first read it. But it was only after I finished it that it all clicked in place for me. I was just thinking about the show because I actually only recently got around to watching season 3, or I should say more accurately, worked up the courage to watch season 3 because it always just sucks me in and it becomes my entire life for the 3 days it takes me to binge the season, and then it fucks me up and it makes me a worse person for a while. So it took me a while to get around to it. I know I'm late to the party, but at least I got this video out before the final season comes out, because I'm pretty sure season 4 is going to be the final season. So anyway, the deity I want to show you is found in a section very early on in the book, which means that it's one of the oldest gods that we know of. And this book came out in 2017, so I'm sure we found even earlier things that could be called religious things since then. But in this section of the book, his main characters, who he affectionately nicknames Adam and Eve, are discovering God for the first time in these ancient cave systems. The art in these caves is as old as 18,000 BCE, which is very ancient indeed. He is describing this cave system called the Volp caves, which are located in southwestern Europe. And Aslan primarily focuses on French archaeologist and Catholic priest Henry Breuil's interpretation and testimony of what he saw in there to make his points. And I will get to it later, but Breuil himself and his interpretation of the whole thing is not without its criticisms, but we'll get to that later. I'm just gonna introduce you to this deity now. Get ready. You can tell me if you think this is who we're dealing with or not. Okay, pause. I know this is gonna ruin the spooky lighting, but I have to turn on the light for this part. Okay. As far as we can tell, fundamental to Adam and Eve's belief system is the notion that the cosmos is tiered. The earth is a middle ground layered between the dome of the sky and the shallow bowl of the underworld. The upper realms can be reached only in dreams and altered states, and usually only by a shaman, someone who acts as an intermediary between spiritual and material worlds. But the lower realms can be accessed by anyone, simply by burrowing deep into the earth, by crawling, sometimes for a mile or more, through caves and grottos to paint, etch, and sculpt their beliefs directly upon the rock wall, which acts as a membrane connecting their world to the world beyond. That journey begins about 500 feet from the entrance of the first cave in the Volp complex, and then in a small antechamber now called the Salle des Morts, French. It is important to note that Adam and Eve do not live in these caves. They are not cavemen. Most painted caves are hard to reach and unfit for human habitation. Entering them is like passing through liminal space, like crossing a threshold between the visible and supersensible worlds. Some caves show evidence of prolonged activity, and others contain a sort of anteroom where archaeological evidence suggests worshippers may have gathered to eat and sleep. But these are not dwelling places, this is sacred space, which explains why the images found inside them are often placed at great distances from the cave's entrance, requiring a perilous journey through labyrinthine passages to view. Very mysterious. So here we get like Adam and Eve's perspective of like going farther and farther into these caves. By the faint light of a flickering flame, Adam and Eve carefully make their way through this chamber by touch, feeling every fluctuation in the walls, their undulations, their warm and cool spots, looking for just the right place to leave their own handprints. Only after leaving their marks are they ready to continue their journey into the very heart of the cave, a small, cramped room tucked away in a perilously sloped, nearly inaccessible corner of the complex that Brule dubbed the Sanctuary. Here, the walls practically pulse with brightly colored images of animals, both drawn and incised into the rock. There are hundreds of them, superimposed one on top of the other, frozen in a frenzy of activity. Bison and bears and horses, reindeer and mammoths, stags, ibexes, and a few creatures that are mysterious and unidentifiable. Some too fantastical to be real, others that muddle the boundary between human and animal. It is not exactly correct to call these drawings images. They are, like the dots and the handprints, symbols reflecting our ancient ancestors' animistic belief that all living things are interconnected, that they all share in the same universal spirit. These animals seem to float in space upside down at odd, impossible angles. They are hallucinatory, devoid of context, unreal. Some of the animals are crisscrossed with sharp lines that are usually interpreted as spears or arrows piercing their flanks. Sorry. Is it getting hot in here? But a closer look at the images suggests that these lines are not entering the animal's body, they are emanating from it. Sorry. This is freaking me out. Just for context, it's 1:26 a.m. Like, it's late out here, and I'm like totally alone in my apartment. It's fine, it's not real, it's just a show, it's made up, is what I tell myself. The lines appear to represent the animal's aura or spirit, its soul. Interesting stuff. At the far end of the sanctuary is a tunnel so narrow it can accommodate only 1 or 2 people at a time. After a few yards, the ledge grows wider, allowing them to turn their bodies and finally face the wall. Only then, as they lift their eyes toward the ceiling, can they see the crowning image of the complex. An image so awe-inspiring, so jaw-dropping, that it practically defies description. The figure is unique in these caves in that it is both painted and engraved. It has been repeatedly modified, redrawn, and repainted, perhaps for thousands of years. Wow! The entire figure is about 2.5 feet tall, far larger than any other image in the room. Whatever it is, it dominates the chamber, floating above the darkness. When Henry Brule first saw the figure a century ago, he was dumbstruck. Clearly, this was a cult image meant for veneration, perhaps even worship. A single dominant humanoid figure set apart like this is unheard of in such caves. At first, Brule assumed that the figure was a shaman dressed in a costume of some kind of hybrid animal. He christened it the Sorcerer, and the name stuck. Bruhl's initial interpretation of the figure is understandable. In ancient communities, shamans were thought to have one foot in this world and one foot in the next. They had the ability to enter altered states, often with the aid of hallucinogens, whereby they could shed their bodies and journey into the spirit world to bring back messages from the beyond, usually with the help of an animal guide. Ow. Ouch. Yeah, that's crazy. Like, already you can see so many pieces coming together. Like, the caves, the hallucinogens part, the animal sort of hybrid business. There's a lot of antler imagery, right, in the show. And obviously, the entire show is an allegory for actual Yellowjackets. Like, you see that motif play out again and again. The group is like basically a beehive. Like, there's a queen, there's like worker bees that they send out first to die. The way they protect the hive is very, yeah, it's like very, it's there. The animal motif is definitely there. And yeah, it's just pretty interesting. Yet these hybrid images do not represent shamans any more than the animal images represent actual animals. Even Bruhl recognized there was something unique about the Sorcerer. After all, this was no mere human-animal hybrid, but rather a collage of species merged to create a single active, animated being, unlike anything else discovered in any painted cave. Again, 2017, this could have changed, but I don't know about that. I'm just focusing on this right now. And so, after some consideration, he changed his mind about what he had discovered, concluding that this strange hypnagogic creature staring back at him from on high was not in fact a shaman. It was, as he wrote in his notebook, the earliest image ever found of God. Whew! The god Bruhl believed he had encountered in the Volp caves is one that scholars of religion had known about for years. It is an ancient deity, perhaps one of the first ever conceived. Ever. Thought to be the master of animals, ruler and guardian of the forests. I literally just got chills. Oh my god. It can be beseeched with prayers to guide the hunter to his prey and placated with offerings should its anger be stoked and the animals disappear. What kind of offerings? What kind of offerings? Tell me what kind of offerings! I'm scared. To it belong the souls of all animals. It alone has the power to release them into the wild, and after they are hunted and killed, it alone can collect their souls back to itself. It is known as the Lord of Beasts. Okay, spooky lighting is back because now is the moment of truth. I've talked about him enough, so without further ado, here he is. Boom. Insert scary sound effect here. Yeah, that's right. You probably either got full body chills or you left. And either way, it's okay. Like, you know what this means, right? It means that if the deity is real in the show, like if it's proven at the end of the show that it's not all in their heads and that the deity is actually real, then that means that Yellowjackets is a true story. It wasn't the trauma of the plane crash that is making them act like this. That's just how we are. It's what happens when you take the Homo sapien out of the city and put them back into hunter-gatherer times. And to be very clear, the book itself doesn't present this as horrifying. It presents it as kind of beautiful and just like a cool fact about our history. It's a tender look into like our motivations and the history behind this art. I should also address the fact that this is a drawing of the cave painting. It's not an actual picture of the cave painting. It's a drawing that Henry Bruhl made of it. And apparently very few people have ever even been let into this cave. And there's only one guy who was let into the cave with Brule who was able to corroborate the fact that yes, they were both there and that Henry's drawing of the thing is accurate, including the antlers and everything. But there are people who do not buy that too. So, and I should say as well that Brule's specific interpretation of what he saw in those caves is not the be-all end-all of scholarly analysis of this thing. He asserts that it's the first ever image of God, but we really have no way of knowing if the ancient people who made that drawing, especially if it took thousands of years to make it, thought of it that way, or if they even knew like what the concept of God was, or if they thought of the drawing as like having any sort of connection to the real world. But they probably did, like, let's be honest. And this is a true scholarly work. So in the notes section, Aslan kind of gives you some insight into the other side. So I think it's only fair to show you that to give you the full picture as well. So first in the notes, like he talks about the scholar John Halvertson, who basically argues that the art in these caves is just art for art's sake, that it has no like religious, like inherent spiritual value, and that it was just like the stages of early cognitive development for ancient Homo sapiens. And he quotes some other scholars who say pretty much the same thing, that this artwork is indicative of a larger worldview or cosmology, and that it really invites like psychoanalytical study rather than like religious study. And then he talks about how there's like a well-known theory in Paleolithic cave art called sympathetic magic. And our boy Henry Brule is like the biggest proponent of this theory, and like he's the one who actually came up with it. But it's basically this idea that like they were using this artwork as a form of communion with nature and with the animals, and it was like them literally trying to tap into something spiritual to make something happen in the material realm. Sorries. I just need to read you this because it's like so crazy. Since the 1960s, however, numerous criticisms have been leveled against Brule. Notably, some have observed that the cave paintings could not have been used for sympathetic magic, as many of the animals depicted were not a part of the diet for Paleolithic humans. Also, if you hear snoring, that's my cat. I'm so sorry. I'll show him to you at the end, just to prove it. I'm so sorry. Others have argued that Brule was predisposed to see the caves as sacred spaces because he was a French Catholic priest with high church sensibilities, and that his work was hampered by methodological problems, such as his reliance upon overly simplistic ethnographic interpretations of the San Bushmen of South Africa. In addition to these charges, Brule has also been criticized for perpetuating a Eurocentric and colonialist understanding of cave art, which privileges parietal art over mobiliary art, by referring to these terms of expression as high art and low art respectively. Even Brule's tracings have been the subject of criticism, such as when Ronald Hutton questioned the addition of antlers in Brule's representation of the Sorcerer from Les Trois Frères. Get his ass. Like, that's actually crazy. Colonialist? Eurocentric? A Catholic priest? What? So sorry, Catholics. I feel like I have to apologize to Catholics in every single video. Spooky lighting back on. So I just read you that to show that clearly Brule had his critics, and it seems like their criticism is well-founded. But Reza Aslan trusts his account and his interpretation, and I think it does make sense. And he's not the only scholar to come to this conclusion either. Aslan quotes several scholars who did agree with Brule's interpretation as well. He quotes two scholars at the end of this sort of section that agree that the cave art was absolutely religious in nature, that it had a function, which was to serve as a kind of communion with animals and nature, a participation mystique, if you will. If there's any truth to their interpretation of the Sorcerer, or the Lord of Beasts, or the first ever image of God, however you want to put it. I like to call him the Lord of Beasts. I think that's dope. And I think that most clearly represents what he represents in the show, in the context of the show. That has mad serious implications for the show. It shows that the Yellowjackets are tapping into something so fundamental to who we are as people that we can still look at artwork of it from 20,000 years ago. Like, Yellowjackets isn't just a story of some teenagers put in a messed up situation. Like, this story has been playing itself out on the human stage for tens of thousands of years. For real. So I leave you with this question. If you were out there, if you were put in that situation, out in the forest, the night blacker than black, the silence so absolute you can hear your own heartbeat, the cold that never sleeps, and the hunger that sits like a stone in your stomach, who would you be, do you think? Would you be like Misty? So desperate for recognition that you would endanger yourself and everyone else? Would you be like Van? Likeable but susceptible to the whims of the group? Would you be like Natalie, the voice of reason? Or like Lottie, the shaman? I'd totally be the shaman. Well, no, I don't know. Would you be like Akila, minding the animals? Or would you be like Shauna, bloodthirsty and merciless and wild? Maybe you would surprise yourself. Maybe you would be able to sense the Lord of Beasts too. I wanted to show you my snoring cat. And of course you've stopped snoring now. But he was the reason. This was the reason behind the snoring. Oh my goodness. What a good boy. Yes, you.